The great Wendell Berry once wrote, "The care of the earth is a most ancient and most worthy, and after all a most pleasing responsibility. To cherish what remains of it, and to foster its renewal, is our only hope." These words have lingered with me, shaping my perspective and inspiring today's episode of the New Orchard Show. I'm honored to introduce my guest, Matt Wong, who many of you may know as the founder of Discernible, which was established in 2019. In 2020, as Victoria and particularly Melbourne faced an unprecedented wave of COVID restrictions, Matt emerged as a vital force. Those were the days marked by curfews, lockdowns, and mandates that often seem rooted more in control than reason, policies whose flaws were evident even then. With Discernible, Matt illuminated the corruption and inconsistencies that plagued the system, offering clarity to a population left fearful and disheartened. To me, that work carried a profound moral weight. It was a stand against the erosion of trust and truth. Today, however, we turn to a different chapter, one grounded in soil and stewardship. Let me tell you a quick story. A couple of years ago, I shared a meal with Matt during a time when I was immersed in Wendell Berry's writings on regenerative farming. Over dinner, I found myself reflecting aloud on its principles: the restoration of land, the cultivation of pure, sustainable food, and the dignity of living in harmony with nature. It wasn't really a pitch or a grand plan for Matt, it's just observations I've been thinking about, shared in passing. Matt, on the other side of the table, listened intently, his demeanor quiet and thoughtful, offering little in response. I didn't really think much of it at the time. So it was with genuine astonishment that weeks later I discovered he had taken up farming with extraordinary purpose. What caught me off guard wasn't that he just started, it was how he did it. Matt assembled a collective, poured resources in a way that sidestepped a mortgage entirely, and acquired a farm with equipment in tow. I had no inkling at all that such an approach was even possible, let alone that our brief chat might resonate with something already stirring in him. His resolve and ingenuity were entirely his own, and they left me in absolute awe. This is precisely the kind of a story that the New Orchard Show seeks to tell. I founded this platform to highlight the efforts of small-scale regenerative farmers, individuals who grasp the critical importance of food security and independence. Their work is a response to pressing need, to produce food that is clean, free of pesticides, free of herbicides, and rich in nutrients, in stark contrast to the depleted offerings of industrial supermarkets. Ultimately, it's about more than sustenance. It's about renewing our connection to Earth, a bond that has weakened over the last few generations. Matt, though new to farming, embodies this ethos. I invited him here to explore his journey, the origins of the project, its progress, and the vision for what lies ahead. Please, join me in welcoming Matt Wong to the show. Let's dive in. Matt, you've gone from being a prominent media personality to working the land as a farmer. What was the turning point that made you decide to embrace this change? Did it feel like a sudden shift or a natural evolution for you?
I think it's a common path, isn't it? People have a professional career and then they end up in farming at some point. They sell it all off, sell their law firm or whatever it is. But for me, it was a bit different. I have always lived a life with a sense of mission. You know, it's not necessarily a noble thing. It's just the way I'm wired. Perhaps it's even a pathology, but I like to serve other people, or at least feel like I'm serving them. It's sort of where I derive my value from. So our farm is a community farm, and I just felt this strong mission of I needed to set up a community-owned farm, and I need to, just serve the co-owners. So that's what I do. I live every day on a very low wage, and I serve them and their families, and it's very fulfilling. If I give you an example, I delivered some of our beef. They're born here, they die here, they're packaged here. It's all closed loop. And I went and delivered a quarter cow to a family, one of our co-owners, and they're in town and they can't sort of make any vegetables or definitely not meat. And so I delivered to the house, and there's the mum and the dad, and they've got a little baby in their arms, and behind them is this cute little 3-year-old girl. I've got girls of, a little bit older, but similar age. And I hand over this 45 kilos of meat, and I just The idea that that little girl that I saw standing behind mummy and daddy and that little baby, they are eating the food that I've raised this cow. We've got a lot of cows, but I've raised them. I've watched them. I then shot it. I then gutted it. I then butchered it. I then lovingly brought it to them. And those calories and those nutrients and those micronutrients are the very things that are going to build the musculoskeletal system of that little girl. I mean, that is some kind of deep, purpose driven stuff. I am literally responsible in that moment of building that little girl's biology. Wow.
That's fantastic. It must give you such a great sense of satisfaction at the end of the working day.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I did this for and why I keep doing it. So that's how the farm began. It was just, it needed to be done, and not many people were doing it. Some others were doing it, and I wasn't satisfied with the way they were doing it. In fact, some of our investors or co-owners have been refugees from other community farm projects, and they've come here. And yeah, I'm basically trying to do a farm built and owned and run for the people by the people.
It's really interesting what you've just said about people moving to your co-ownership model from other farm projects that have not worked out for them. I understand if you want to keep things confidential, and please do if you must, but are you able to explain what has not worked for them in the context of these other farming joint ventures and why they chose you and your farming model?
So as I said earlier, the idea of perhaps I have a pathology of wanting to serve people or please people. Maybe, I had a rough childhood. Maybe that's how I feel loved. I don't know. But that's what drives me in my decision making for the farm. I just want them to like me, and I want them to feel loved by me, that I did a good by them. So that's a very different motive than a profit motive. And some of the other community farms that we have popping up in Australia, some of them are now defunct, many. They've been under media scrutiny and under lawsuits and so on. And I've seen into them, and I've spoken to the founders and so on. And it's very clear for me from day one, even when they were going well, and they've all now collapsed, but even when they were going well, there was a strong profit motive, though they were trying to create a off-grid or out-of-system, independent from the big chains. They were trying to create a farm like that, but beneath it all, the way they structured it and ultimately what happened proves that they were primarily trying to... Grift is a strong word. I don't want to accuse them of grift, but it has that smell to it because they quickly pivot to other things now, continuing, crypto, just continuing to collect money from people who are feeling a bit shaken from what's happened since 2020. And, that's not cool with me. Whereas our farm, for example, which is sold out, I can't sell it to you. This is not an ad. It's full. But our farm is driven by what I've said, like passion, meaning, purpose. Very different.
I really like that. That sort of authentic and transparent attitude seems to be a constant in everything that you do, Matt. Let me ask you this. As someone who has experienced success in business and media, how has your definition of success evolved since moving into regenerative agriculture? How do you now measure fulfillment compared to your previous careers?
That's funny that you would ask, how has my definition of success changed because of regen agriculture? I'm not sure success is easy to feel or experience or measure when you go into farming. I think it's one of those activities, and any farmer will tell you this. It's grinding and long, and the wins are different from the city life where you might get a promotion or deliver on a good project or become famous online or do whatever the thing is. Farming doesn't have those sorts of wins. It has grinding, or the process is more important than the destination. And it's interesting because I was very physically drained today, working in the sun, doing some physical stuff. The dopamine reward you get from farming is more the build-up. So how dopamine peaks before you get your reward, whether it's chocolate or sex or whatever, right? It's not when you get your reward. And the longer you have that build-up, the more you can have a dopamine release when you get the reward, but it peaks just before you get it. And then you can, if the reward is greater than you expected, you get a massive boost. If it's lower than you expected, it down regulates. And there's a whole science behind it. But the point is, it's the journey, not the destination, I think actually has a biochemical um, reality to it. And I think farming is good like that because the game never ends. And even if you have wins along the way, frustrations and wins, the type of wins are drip fed in a way that increases your dopamine more slowly and more regularly. So today, for example, I did a great job doing this task, and I got to look out at the view as I was walking home, and just had lots of little dopamine wins along the way. But it happened all day long. I didn't try really hard to land a big client working for, at Tesla. I landed some police contracts to buy Teslas in Sydney, and I was work really hard, you're on the edge, and then bang, they say yes, they're going to buy a bunch of Teslas, and you think I've won. You get that dopamine hit. I think farming success, what I've described, is probably more normal and healthier for us.
Yeah, it would be strange if it wasn't. Matt, what has surprised you the most about the day-to-day work of farming? Was there an unexpected joy or a challenge that you didn't foresee when you first started with this big project?
The idea that, somebody said adventure may harm you, but monotony will kill you. And I think in living in the city, I didn't realize how lulled into monotony I was. When it rains, when I lived in the suburbs, it's just nice, great. I love rain. I don't know why people say it's horrible weather. Rain's beautiful. But now I'm on the farm. The difference between sunny weather or cloudy weather is real. The difference between dry weather and rainy weather is very, very significant. Access. You add some wind into that, it's now trees falling. It's did the fence break? Did the cows get out? It's is there enough water in the dam because it hasn't rained for so many days for the cows to get into that little dam? So I find that when I go back to the suburbs, I laugh. I'm like, everything seems so beautiful and comfortable, and there's drains that work, and there's no mud anywhere, but it's also somehow fake. Not that the people are fake; they are real people, and my heart is for the people wherever they are, which happens to be mostly in cities. But the environment is so artificial and manufactured to be comfortable that that kind of surprised me. That I didn't realize how lulled into comfort I was in the city. Up here, I tell you what, in the farm, like one thing could happen. This is the third time we've tried to do this interview because one time it's like, oh well, the goats got out, now I've got to chase them down the road and fix their fence so they can stay in for the night. You just have what I call a lot of side quests. If you play computer games, you go out to do one thing today, and you end up doing 3 or 4 side quests, and maybe you never got to the main objective. We do that tomorrow.
It's very cool that you've managed to gamify your day-to-day, and that's what keeps you motivated and effective. Also, it's interesting what you've said about city comforts and simplicity of life in the city. It's almost a truism that too much comfort will kill your natural human instinct, and it's definitely not easy to get it back once that instinct fades. Matt, you spent years engaging with people intellectually, through media, through Discernible. How does the mental engagement of farming compare to that? Is there a different kind of clarity or pace that comes from working with the land?
It is a slower pace on the farm, of course, but you're not talking to many humans. So the intellectual stimulation, I would say, can often be quite low, even when you're problem solving. I'm very blessed in that I still do work for Discernible, my company. I still do interviews. I still talked to a nuclear scientist the other day. So I'm able to exercise that that part of me. But I do wonder if I'm getting dumber. I do. I looked at myself interviewing Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford the other day in Melbourne, a video, and I just thought I was so intelligent. What happened? But it is probably better for you to do farm work. But if you can somehow, in terms of for your body and your soul and the soul base, but if you can somehow still maintain connection to that which is stimulating, and so I get to do that. But an interesting thing here is it actually helped me to understand why suicide is so high amongst male farmers. I'm in fortunate position in the way we've structured the farm, where I'm not under the, we don't have a mortgage, for example. But I can see when you have extreme stresses, mortgage, things are going poorly and whatever else, and then nature serves you a bad hand, like I've described, trees fall down, cows get out, you lose some animals, whatever. And layer on top of that, you don't have a lot of people connection and you don't have a lot of intellectual stimulation. You can really feel alone. I often feel alone, and not in a bad way. I am alone a lot out in the fields. And I know I live here, my kids live here, they're homeschooled, so I should see them all the time. But there have been days where I literally haven't seen my kids for maybe 2 days straight, not in the morning, not in the night, for 2 days. And I live in the same house and they're here all day and I'm here all day and I'm out in the fields. So it is very lonely. Uh, and I do worry about farmers who don't take the time to develop that other side of them.
That's a really good watch out for people like myself who over romanticize this whole idea of dropping the city life and becoming a farmer. It's good to think about these little pitfalls that one will surely encounter if one chooses to follow this path.
By definition, like by job design, as a farmer, I believe, you are in with nature, which is good, and you have all of that kind of soul food you may think of if you're a city dweller, but you are more vulnerable. You can be more lonely, literally and day to day, and overall, you may have fewer friends. Out here, my wife is currently quite lonely. She just doesn't have as many friends out here. So, mental health, I think, is actually more difficult for farmers.
Farming can be quite unpredictable. How has dealing with the land taught you humility? Have you found yourself letting go of this idea of control that might have been more present in your previous work?
I've been fortunate to already be forced to let go of control in my previous work, but I will tell you something that I think farming's just proved for me. The idea of humility that you raise, people think humility is thinking of yourself poorly. C.S. Lewis said that humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So, in other words, less often. And I find that farming, people describe humility. What they're talking about is the land humbles you, the storms humble you, the trees humble you. I think it's not necessarily that they're all telling you that you're so small and you need to be humble. I think what it is you're busy. I think that your mind, your eyesight, your vision, your time, your day, your plans, everything is so consumed with what's around you and what you're trying to achieve and the side quests you're going on that you have a great blessing. And that is, for a brief moment in time, you're not thinking about yourself. And if you think about it, this is a great plague in our world. We go out and, do I look fat in this? What would the guy who walks by? Well, we always, people are thinking about, they're not though, are they? They're not thinking about us. And if they are, they're going to see us once in their lifetime, never see us again. In 80 years, 100 years, we're all going to be dead. No one cares what you did, said, wore. So I think nature is a gift in that sense. It forces you to be humble, but only in that C.S. Lewis sense, which I think is the actual definition of humility.
Considering you've been doing this only for a couple of years, I wanted to ask you about your local community and if you've managed to build one where you can lean on other farmers for help, guidance, or simply barter some goods you're producing on the farm.
Yeah, you have to on a farm, especially if this size is 150 acres odd. But so our co-owners don't live here. They're all professionals who live in the city, and engineers, doctors, lawyers. So they're not available to come and help. I serve them. But around me, yes, there is literally, okay, so there's these big storms, a year and a half ago in 2023 or whatever, and lots of trees down. Power was out for like 25 days. It was crazy. So big storms, trees down, all sorts of stuff happening. On our street, I've got a neighbor called Richard, and straight away, just like, hey, what's happening? Within 2 minutes of trees falling down, trees come down on the road. It's gone through that person's fence, blah 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 blah, and we coordinate straight away. You got any diesel? I'm running a bit low. Bring your tractor out. I'll bring the excavator. We'll move that. Bring your chainsaw. Blah blah blah, and we'll clear that road within 10 minutes. Depending on what the thing is. But the SES will rock up maybe an hour or two later and say, we're here to help, and we go, there's nothing to do. We've done it. So you have to have that. There's people on the local Facebook community saying, yes, haven't had time to get to us. It's been 2 days. There's a tree blocking our driveway. And that's where we got in and say, hey, I'm a farmer, 800 meters up the road. I'll bring down my tractor if you want, and I'll lift it off your driveway. So the currency of rural living is helpfulness. You have to be helpful to others. That's what it is. Don't worry about saying nice things or giving them presents or gifts or chocolates when you move in. Just be helpful. And so, yes, we are constantly helping one another. And the funny thing is, there's this one family on our street that everyone hates because they keep on being absolute a-holes to everyone. And they've got a little tiny block. So we've got acres and acres, right? And they've got half an acre. And they're living the city attitude in the rural. So when I took my front end loader with this big 7-ton machine with this big claw grab on the front to remove a tree out of their driveway. And I got there and she's standing there tapping her foot on the phone, a stereotype, middle-aged white lady, Karen, where's the manager? And she's on the phone on speaker saying, why won't they pick up? And I'm like, do you want me to pick up the tree? And she goes, I don't know why they don't pick up. Why do we pay our rates? I said, oh, who are you calling? SES? No, council. They should move this. I'm like, it's storming. It literally just came down and she's demanding that council. So that's an example of how not to do rural living. And we don't abuse those sorts of people, even though the whole street hates them, because she calls council on us when we'll help people, to no end. But then we might burn a bonfire on the 1st of July when we should have burnt it on the 30th of June. We're one day late. We're not supposed to burn in July, and she'll call us cops on us, right? So everyone hates her. And so now she just doesn't get help. So we don't do mean things to people. We just, the SES should be able to help you, love. Like, we just don't bring our tractors out.
Fair enough. In your new role as a farmer, you're not just growing food, but also nurturing the land. How do you view your role as a steward of the earth? Do you see parallels between managing a business and managing the health of the land?
Managing a business is managing people, really, and that sucks. To all the managers out there, I feel your pain. Now, this is a big secret, all right, about managing the land and being a farmer. That farmers, some of them can be so prideful that they'll tell you, you're not a farmer. Yeah, I've been doing this for 50 years. And I'm like, you've been doing this for 5 generations, 50 years, and you're still bad at it. So I think the best farmers are humble. The best farmers are not saying, I've been doing this and you don't know how to use that and you shouldn't have used that. And so some of the biggest hearted farmers I've seen have been really open to some new Asian guy. I'm Asian if you're listening. Some new Asian guy rocks up on the block into White Town farming and he's having a go with his new tractors and stuff. And then they'll come around and maybe I'm doing things wrong and I bought the wrong tractor and whatever else. But they're just nice and they'll say things like this. You'll get it. And I'll be like, wow, that's really, a little, just 3 words, you'll get it. It is so empowering to hear from a old white farmer across the road for this little weird Asian who's moved in. Whereas some of the small farms are so small-minded. I've had them come over. Why'd you buy that? No, that's the wrong way to do it. No, don't clean your boots. They're going to get dirty anyway. I'm like, you bastard. Sorry, I said bastard. Sure. So my point being is, what people don't understand is, the point of all this funny story is, farming is unique. Farming is about stewardship. So everything else we do, we create and we own it. But I put it to you that farmers don't actually do anything. You think I'm out there right now causing my cows to grow or causing the grass blades to grow? Like, am I out there shaking the clouds to put water on my pastures? Am I out there squeezing an egg through the bottom of a chicken? No, I'm setting up not even setting up. If I die and disappear, there may be a few issues, but in general, nature is going to continue. The deer that live on our property are going to come over and eat stuff. Everything's going to continue. If I plant a lot of trees, fruit trees and ornamental trees, right? I'm not growing them. I hate it when farmers say, I grew these trees. I grew 50 acres of corn. No, you didn't. The earth grew it. Or if you're religious like me, God grew it. All we're doing is planting the bloody thing. So I'm a big fan of something called the stun method, right? It's a farming method called sheer, total, utter neglect. The reason why stun method is great is because some things you use stun method on, it just proves that we're not so important after all. If you can just let nature do what it does and gently guide it and work with it, it will produce for you, and you're not toiling to force it to produce. A great example, if you live in the suburbs, is when you rip up some grass in your backyard. If you leave that as dirt, what happens? Like, nature abhors a vacuum, and there's going to be weeds popping up, blowing in, might be there under the soil or seeds, and that is going to try and do something, and you're going to fight tooth and nail to keep it as dirt and spray your glyphosate and then put some weed mat down and all sorts of stuff. It proves the point. Nature does the work, and the farmers don't really produce anything, if I'm honest. We steward it. So I think but naturally you have to have a humble attitude when you're farming, because you're not really producing anything. I believe.
This is a bit of a shot in a dark question, but it just pops into my head, and you might not be able to answer it because you're kind of new to this farming business. But the type of agriculture you're prosecuting, the style of stewardship that you've been describing, is it sort of infinitely scalable and able to feed the masses? Can it deliver non-toxic quality food for all?
Mate, you're asking someone who's barely a farmer, okay? So I can only tell you that I've heard people like Joel Salatin from Polyface Farms in the USA and others who think that it can. However, there are some caveats over changing expectations. So the way we treat chicken, right, in the mass production system is horrific, but that's only because at the end use, we have heaps of waste. We have people who only want to eat the thigh but don't want to eat the oyster underneath the thigh. We have same with bigger animals like lamb. Like, we're better now, but in the past, nobody wanted to eat neck. There was a day when shanks, nobody wanted them. Let me tell you one that bugs me right now. One of the most delicious things you can eat is chicken skin, right? Chicken skin is sold in Japanese yakitori restaurants, food on a stick. They get skin, they salt it, they thread it on a stick, you eat it, you pay $6 for 3 sticks. It's amazing. If you go to a butcher today, and I do this often, hey, can I have some chicken skin? They'll give it to you for free. I've had butchers give me box after box because it's waste product. It's garbage. And one of my employees here, he works as a butcher locally as well, a big butcher. They massive butchery, and he tells me it's just they rip the skin off, they throw it in the bin, and they got bins full of the skin. I'm like, give it to me. And he goes, yeah, but they're full of other rubbish, so we can't take it. But they're throwing out all this food because people want skinless chicken breasts. Now, there's nothing wrong with a skinless chicken breast. It's just that we've built our modern lives around, I only eat skinless chicken breasts and broccoli because I'm a bodybuilder or whatever it is. I only make curries with this one thing. And we never embrace all these other parts of the animal. And so I think when you listen to people like Joel Salatin and others, I think they say, yes, you can, but we have to change some of the habits of society. We can't deliver the same 1 billion chicken breasts with no skin and do that in a regen ethical way. You need to do volume and cages if you want to deliver that kind of just skinless chicken breast.
How about we pivot a little bit? Wendell Berry often speaks about the wisdom of the land and how it can teach us what we need to know if we listen closely. What do you think are some of the most profound lessons the land has taught you that you might not have learned anywhere else?
That is a deep question. What has the land taught me that I have not learned anywhere else? Well, I think what I've mentioned earlier about the humility of being a steward rather than a captain or someone in control. That's been a big lesson. And when things rain, for example, let's say it rains. When it rains where you are, who cares? In the suburbs. When it rains where you are, we have issues, as I said. When I first came to the farm, it was just issues. Oh, that stupid rain. Now I've got mud on my driveway. I've got all these issues. People won't be able to drive out because they'll be slipping, blah, blah, blah. But I've started to try and listen, like you say. What does that rain mean? Why is it here? What is the ecosystem doing when it rains? And I've noticed that animals adapt to the changes better than I do. I'm trying to force my civilization and my way of life, my human-centric way of life, into whatever weather pattern. But now I'm discovering, no, the weather is doing X, so I'm now going to change my plans and I'm going to do this in a different way and work with the land. And I find my stress levels go way down. And I guess if that's what Wendell's talking about, listening on a simple level, listening to what it's gotten to the point now where I can hear frogs. I never used to hear frogs. And I hear the frogs and I go, oh, I think it's about to rain, or I think it just rained, which means the cows are going to think this or be doing that, which means I might not disturb the chicken tractors today. I might, I make decisions reflectively and reactively rather than trying to just do my agenda.
That's exactly what Berry was talking about in The Unsettling of America, and it's good to see you're already tuned into this operating model. I've listened to a couple of recent interviews you've done on Discernible, and noticed that you're getting a little bit more comfortable opening up about your childhood trauma. Now, Wendell also talks about how the care we give to the land can heal both the land but also ourselves. Has your experience of farming provided any personal healing or transformation at all? How does working with the earth affect your inner life?
No, I haven't noticed it healing my trauma, but I do see how land can heal trauma because of the way it has forced me to change perspectives. Like I've been telling you this whole interview, it's forced me to become more self-reliant or interdependent on others, or more connected with the reality of trees falling and so on. So it's kind of like mindfulness, we have to do when we're in the city, because everything's ethereal and we have to bring ourselves back to what's real. Well, if you're in nature, it does it for you. Like crash, bang, a tree fell in front of you, or whatever the thing is, you got to walk down the driveway and it's slippery. You're constantly brought back to be mindful. And I think one of the things I've seen a problem was with sexual abuse and other traumatic stuff, which people struggle with, and you've mentioned about my childhood. I think people can tend to get into a low agency position after those assaults. And I think that's one of the things we've heard experts talk about is quite deadly. You don't want to tell them it's your fault. Of course, it's not your fault. But at the same time, you don't want to lead them down a path where you're a powerless victim with low agency and it's not your fault and you had no input into it and there's nothing you could have done. You do want people to end up in a high agency position. And farming, or just living rurally where things are a bit more difficult, forces you to be high agency. I can't tell you the number of times that I've wanted something. I see a problem. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. There's got to be a tradie that I can just pay $200 to solve it. And often there's not a tradie to fix the tracks on the excavator, whatever the thing is. And even more often, it's too slow to find them and get them out. I need to fix it and get on with the farming. So I've come to the point now, it's been a hard lesson where crap happens to me during the day. It could be a tool, a machine, it could be anything. It could be a beehive fell over and whatever. Cows got out on the road, and you take a moment to, I don't often swear, but other farmers will just swear, or you take a moment, I just sigh. You take a moment to go, this sucks. Then after that moment's passed, what do? You get on with it. And we've all heard this about farmers. They just get on with it because there's nothing else you can do. And I think that attitude of agency and resourcefulness without external help is gold. And I imagine if I went through some crises now, or assaults or whatever, I think I'd be in a much better position to weather them because I've been forced to have such a high agency and resourcefulness mindset as a result of living rurally.
I have a question for you. I think I should have asked at the very beginning of this interview. What was your thought process that led you to procuring the land and becoming a farmer in the first place, Matt? As far as I know, this is not something you've been contemplating for years before you've actually pulled the trigger on this project.
I am now a farmer because I looked around and saw that there wasn't enough people taking control of their food supply. And it is difficult to do it on your own. If you want to grow some herbs in your balcony or your back garden, you can. If you want to grow some carrots or pumpkin, you can. But how do you do meat? Meat is the thing that seems to come under attack more often, whether it's just because the pricing's up or whether they're doing things to meat you don't want them to do with it, or whether they're restricting meat, like you're eating too much meat-free Mondays or whatever. So I just thought, why aren't we, as a collective, as people, as Australians, why aren't we owning farms? Why are the ownership of farms going from family owned into conglomerates. Why are people like that great hero of the world, Bill Gates? Why is he owning up so much farmland? Why does Gina Ryan, why is she the largest farm agriculture owner in Australia? Gina Reinhardt, the mining magnate, because she's rich and she can afford it? Yes. Okay. But why do we all think supermarket's good enough for me? And I just thought we could come together and all collectively own or pool our resources, both money and time and knowledge, and we could actually take back some of our food infrastructure, which is what we've done. So it's not just money, but that's important because a lot of us can't afford to buy a farm on our own. But it's how do you run a farm? Well, we've got an agronomist, we have other farmers, we have other. I don't want to give away too much of the people we have. Some of them are famous, but people with skill sets that we can lean on each other in times of crisis, or if just to build a farm, or if we need to get something out in media. We have these types of people in our co-ownership group. If we need to talk to a politician, they're in our co-ownership group. So why not pull those resources? And I'm hoping that what we're doing here is inspiring others to do the same thing. And I think it is. So I'm about to take off this weekend to go to Taree in New South Wales. And I've been all over the eastern seaboard doing farm consulting to people who want to take control of their food supply, because there's not a lot of people who want to start becoming like a wheat farmer and having 1,000 acres, but there is millions of us in Australia and around the world who have a little bit of extra land or money or access and want to have, it's a little 5-acre one. I'm doing this. Another one I did up in Queensland was, what were they? 80 acres. Another one in Gippsland in Victoria I did was 70 acres. Another one was 10 acres. So lots of people have got little bits of land and they want to start something. And so I'm going around helping them set up their own little farming operation. Sometimes it's for them only. Sometimes it's for them and their family. One of them was for them in their immediate community. It was about 20 people. So that really encourages me that people are starting to see, well, we don't have much control over our food supply. Because I think that's really, what was that quote about an army? You're in a battle, you're 3 meals away from an army's defeat, something like that. Like, you got to keep your army fed. I think that's the key to a lot of what happened recently in the world. People complain about what happened in 2020 in terms of lockdowns and mandates and so on. But really what it was I have to do X. I have to lock down. I have to have injection, whatever it is, so that I can pay my mortgage, so I can buy food. And I just think that that's a level of vulnerability that is new and doesn't have to be that way. So that's why I started the Farm Project, to not just take control of food supply, but to lower our vulnerability so we can make choices. I mean, lockdown in Melbourne, for me, the most locked down place on earth, was fantastic because I had choices. I had money in the bank. I had a business I just sold. I ended up making videos on the internet with the Discernible for fun. That took off. But not everyone had that luxury. Other people had to do work and jobs and quit and do all sorts of stuff they didn't want to do because they didn't have options.
I had no idea you're doing consulting in this farming space. It's very interesting that you are, and I think it's fantastic. How does it all work? If I get my hands on a piece of land, let's say in Northern Vic, and I'd like some guidance from you on how to set it all up, how do I get in touch and book you, and what do I get from this engagement?
I just put posts out on social media. It's just been word of mouth, but I've just been going around places saying, okay, you don't know how to go from where you are now to where you want to be. So you've got a bit of extra land, you've got 2 acres out the back, or you've got 20 acres you just bought, but you don't know where to start. If you go down to Elders Farm Supplies, or you go on to Joel Salatin, they're all going to tell you what they're trying to sell. Like Joel Salatin is going to try and sell you chicken tractors and that kind of stuff. Elders are going to try and sell you, well, you need to get seed and test your pastures. But no one is out there advocating for, you're a city slicker, you don't know how to farm, you've got this many acres, your goal is to have your own meat supply. Okay, build this fence, get this animal, do this, rotate them, do that. I've got a fencer who I lean on my own trades that I use. So I might be consulting for your farm, but I'll show your farm in the map to my agronomist, to my fencer, and I'll say, hey, how are we going to best fence this gorge to fit this many cattle? And then I produce the recommendations for that person. And then they go, thank you. Now I know what to do. And they execute. So I'm just trying to help small people start little hobby farms and give them the resources that we have in knowledge that they can't find from people who are trying to sell you something.
Yeah, that's great. I really love that. It's so good that you're helping hobby farmers to get a good start. Matt, if you don't mind, I'd like us to get back before we wrap up to the themes from The Unsettling of America. The author of this book speaks to the paradoxical freedom that comes from embracing limits. Have you found a kind of liberation in the constraints imposed by nature at all? The seasons, the soil, the climate. How does this contrast with the limitless possibilities you've once had in the media and entrepreneurship?
People have spoken about in society this idea that absolute freedom to do whatever you want is not actually freedom. I guess it often comes from the religious crowd, but there is this kind of growing sentiment that life within lanes is better than life without lanes. And I have always tended to believe that and live that way because it gives you a sense of, it's not like bumpers when you go bowling. It's more like knowing where the lines are in the road. You don't necessarily have to drive within the lines. In fact, I often don't. If it's dark at nighttime and I'm driving through where I live, there's deer that jump out in front of your car. So the safest place for me is to drive in the middle of the road with the dotted dashed lines going through the middle of the car. So I've got maximum distance between left and right and the trees. Now, that's just an example of where I want the lines and I'll use the lines, but I'll also not use the lines. In the same way, I'm not suggesting people don't follow, hard-coded rules in our world, but I'm just saying that you shouldn't think of rules as like the stupid old white Republican man coming to make my life boring. It's they are guidelines to help you survive on the road. So yeah, I think that the limits of nature have caused me to slow down, but I don't think you need nature to give you that sense of freedom. I think you can embrace all the concepts we're talking about today. I think you can do it in the suburbs or in the high rises. You can do it. It's just more difficult. So I don't. I'm not throwing shade at Berry, but he seems pretty infatuated where you've got to get out to nature to get these things. I'm not convinced that nature is the only way to get it. It's just the easiest way.
Yeah, that's fair enough. By limits, Wendell Berry refers to this natural, ecological, and ethical boundary that he thinks humans must recognize and must respect in order to maintain a sustainable and meaningful relationship with the land, the community, and themselves. I'm mindful of time, so I've got a last question for you. What legacy do you hope to leave behind, both through your work with Discernible and your journey into regenerative agriculture? How do you hope to inspire others to follow a similar path?
I like to wreck more than build. I don't like old ossified structures there for no reason, and I just think I like to come to a conversation and say something ridiculous to break the atmosphere, break the mood, because I think people are too unthinking. We just do things because that's the way we've always done it, and so this will not be my last project. I'm already working on the next project, and whilst I'm continuing this project, here's a tip for people. If they want to figure out kind of their purpose in life, why don't they go ahead and write their eulogy, what someone would say when you're dead at your funeral? But write two, right? So people have used me for, sounds so stupid, but life coaching type stuff before, and I get them to write two eulogies. One is what people would say if you died right now. What would they say about you? Be honest. And for me, it was like, he's a nice guy. He's pretty funny. He plays piano really well. And I was just so horrified at a legitimate look at what people would say if I died. Because what I wanted them to say, and this is your second eulogy, write what you wish they would say at your funeral. It's your second eulogy. And I wrote that. And the gap between your actual what they would say today and what you want them to say, that's your purpose. That's the meaning of your life. You need to figure out how to close that gap. And I've been doing that now for about 8 years or so. And I'm really happy to say that if I died today, my eulogy would be more similar to the goal eulogy than to the first one. And, just simply, I believe in shaking things up and creating new things, and telling people they're being too serious, and stirring the pot. And part of my second eulogy is being that change agent, and bringing difference to the world because of that, through the service of my life and what I do. And so that's why Discernible is probably not the hottest, and my farm is probably not the hottest thing in town, and it's not the most famous thing. But we're still here when others have fallen over, and we will still be here because it's authentic. It's just here trying to change things up, and maybe it's a bit quieter now because the world is not so bad. But when the world goes crazy in 2025, people need us, we will answer the call. I'll be back there doing the interviews that matter. I'm still doing interviews, but I'll be back there doing whatever they need. And same with the farm. The farm is here now, which is great, but meat's not banned. Toilet paper's in big supply. There are no lockdowns, but we're prepared. When things happen, we will be at such an advantage. When the rest of you can't have lamb, we have plenty of lamb.
Well, it's a good thing I know where you live, so I can knock on your door and put my two hands together and beg you for some beautiful lamb. Matt, thank you very much for today. This was a lot of fun, and hopefully we can bring you back and you can talk to us more about how the farm is developing and how the animals are growing and how you're turning all of it into a wonderful success. All the best, and again, thank you very much for finding time for me.
Thank you.
And that is all for today's episode of the New Orchard Show. I'm going to leave you with one more thought from Wendell Berry, who said, "The soil is a great connector of lives, the source and the destination of all. It's the healer and restorer and resurrector, by which disease passes into health, age into youth, death into life. Without proper care for it, we can have no community, because without proper care for it, we can have no life." Matt Wong's story of stepping into farming with purpose, of building something sustainable and real, reminds us what's at stake and what's possible when we believe and not overthink things. I hope his work and his vision inspires you as much as it continues to inspire me. If you'd like to follow Matt, please take a look at the show notes. There's a couple of links there. If you want to get in touch with him, you can find him on Discernible. He's got an official website for that media company, and you can also find him on X. All the links in the show notes for you. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.